fast, and then we'll have local elections for the even commission and Board of Education seats. So for Board of Education 2468, and for commission 246810. If you're not sure what's, and then nationally, of course, we're going to have Georgia House, Georgia Senate, U.S. House, and then Purdue is up. Yeah, Purdue is up at the state Senate, at the U.S. Senate for Georgia. So if you're not sure what district you're in, there's some resources where you can figure that out if you need to figure out what you want to run for. Okay, and then let me know. We do have. I think that's it, really. We do have Avery Murdy is here, who is actually one of our trainers. He'll be here with us on May 26th, doing field strategy and an overview of Goat Builder. But we will not see you all back here for another couple of weeks. We've got Easter next Sunday, and then the Sunday after that, the training space wasn't free. So we'll see you in May. And I think that's all I've got. So I'll let Lydia and Briana introduce themselves. Oh, no, that's not it. I'm sorry, one more thing.
Okay.
So, sorry. Big thing. So I'm going to pass this around. This is our sign-in. Please put your name and your email. And because we are not in the business of training Republicans, I have included for the new folks here just the abbreviated platform for the Athens Democrats. So I do ask you to write that you agree to uphold the Democratic platform for us. So, so if you're unfamiliar with the platform, you can take a look at it. Just sort of look through that and make sure that you feel okay saying yes. But hopefully everyone will say yes. So, no, I have two more things. I can share the PowerPoint after we're done, so I'll send you the PowerPoint. Chris is taping the trainings, and so if you end up missing a week, let me know and we can get you a copy of the video as well. So, okay, that's it. I'll get this started.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome and thanks for being here today on this day with like treacherous weather outside. My name is Briana Bivens. I am Organization Coordinator of Athens for Everyone, but I'm here today to talk about some of my personal experiences in campaign work, specifically in campaign management. I managed Tim Benson's campaign for county commission, which we are very excited to say was successful in 2018. So that's some of the specific experience I'll be drawing on. Yeah.
Thank you, Briana. Hi, I feel like I've seen most of you at some point, but my name is Lydia Aletraris. I have worked on a few campaigns at different levels, some were successful, some weren't. County Commission, State House, and State Senate, and I got involved because in my regular job I do a lot of data analysis. I'm a program manager and research scientist studying a lot of the ills that we have in society, human trafficking, substance abuse treatment, and then I wanted to see how I could bring that expertise to campaigns. But I've worked in lots of different roles, including campaign manager and volunteer coordinator, which is a really important role, and field director, and I'll speak to you about some of my experiences. And we're really lucky to have Avery here because he has a lot more experience than I do as a campaign manager. So Avery, feel free to chime in and when we're talking about it.
Not here to interrupt.
Okay, well, you're saying it, feel free to do so.
Okay, so we're a pretty small group, so I want to invite anyone that's in the back, if you feel inclined, to move forward so we can kind of make this. It's going to be more of a dialogue. There's going to be space for questions and comments throughout. I also encourage you to take care of yourselves and your bodies, so if you need to use the bathroom at any point, please do that, or get a snack or whatever you need to do, step outside. So we wanted to start by inviting all of you to introduce yourselves with your names, your pronouns if you'd like, and any other information. Specifically, we're interested to know why you're here, what you're hoping to learn today, and so hopefully we can, be useful. Yeah. You want to start?
Mark Martin, born and raised in Athens, worked at Hills Middle School, teaching for 10 years. We're gonna run in 2018
Last
for
year.
the, yeah, for District 2. I had personal things that came up, so we can do it back again in 2020. So it's getting ready. So just whatever I can learn to build out campaign, so make it more successful this year.
Jennifer Weishaupt, I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. I'm here just to think about maybe helping out with the campaign.
I'm Carol Myers.
Hi, everybody.
Come on
Want to see that?
in. There. You can sit wherever you like. We're just going around introducing ourselves, names, pronouns, and why you're here.
Why am I here? Oh, I've worked on lots of campaigns. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say, and I'm considering running for county commissioner. Considering, underlined.
I'm Susan Schaefer. I currently work for our probate court in Athens-Clarke County, and at some point, Judge Tate's going to retire, and so contemplating running to that position.
I just realized I recognize you because you signed my marriage license. Thank you. My name is Lydia. I've never worked on a campaign before. I just want to get better at figuring out how I can help others who
I'm Zach McDowell. I'm here to get good, suck less in the world of campaigning. I've volunteered in a few, and I just want to get some more skills and get some more insights for any future campaigns I work on.
My name is Chris Dowd. I'm on the Candidate Development Committee, and I also want to be working on campaigns.
My name is Dr. Tiro Sambe. I'm here to learn what I have to learn to be a better campaigner. I currently volunteer with Gwinnett County Elections, area manager. I just want to learn what I have to learn to be a better person down the road.
John Q. Williams, most people just call me John Q or JQ. Currently a sergeant at the police department. I work over domestic violence and missing persons. And I am running for sheriff in 2020, so I'm trying to get things together for that campaign and help anybody else who needs it.
My name is Chuck Rosenberger. I'm with the Oconee County Democrats, and I was fortunate enough to see this program last winter, and it was great. And I don't think there's anybody else from Oconee here, so I'll have to bring my knowledge back to the group.
So I'm Avery Murdy, as they already pointed out, I've been a campaign manager and work in politics, but I am here just to observe.
My name is Robin Whetstone, and I came really close to saying that I would run against CalCert, but then Mary Sue Hilliard said that she would do it, and I felt like my sentence had been commuted to 2020. So I'm just here to meet people and get information.
My name's Ali Elian. I'm a student at UGA. I've worked on a few campaigns, and I'm just here to learn more, get ready for 2020.
Hey y'all, I'm Martin. I occasionally volunteer with ACES Canada for everyone. I'm just here to learn.
My name is Valerie Johnson. I retired a couple of weeks in 2016 to Greene County from New Jersey. And I volunteered for campaigns since I was 18 years old, so I am familiar with it, although I see that Georgia politics is a whole nother animal. So I just come to learn and help out.
I'm Rocky Hicks, and I recently transplanted to Georgia in Athens, and I'm interested in learning about how to help on campaign.
Thank you. Well, we're very happy you all are here. There's lots of talent and experience and expertise in this room. So I want to say that we're not, I feel that I'm not an expert in this area. And I see this as a space where we're kind of like learning and growing together. So please feel free to chime in with your own insights and ideas as we see.
I agree. Right. Any experiences or any things that have come up as you've worked on campaigns that we can all address. Yeah.
Okay, so as you can see, we have sort of an ambitious agenda, so we'll see what we can get through in our time together today. At some point, we are going to have a short break, probably after the first hour or so, so just be prepared for that. We're going to talk with you about campaign manager responsibilities, strategy, messaging, targeting, team building, campaign roles and responsibilities, community engagement, communications, endorsements, budget, fundraising. Okay, so this is a lot, right? We are not diving deeply into all of these things because there are other trainings that Francis is so graciously offering that are going to do some of this. So what we're trying to do is paint a broad picture of some of the things that as a campaign manager you'll need to have your, you'll need to, I was saying something about pulse. Yeah, anyway, have an eye on. Keep your eye on. Okay. Okay, so wanted to start by just introducing what we see as some of the core responsibilities of a campaign manager. These include overseeing all day-to-day operations of the campaign, hiring, training, and supporting the campaign team, and we'll talk about those roles a little later on, coaching and supporting the candidate, developing and adhering to the campaign plan and budget, and we'll talk a little bit about the campaign plan and budget later on as well, seeking endorsements, managing the candidate's schedule, ensuring that reporting requirements are met, and maintaining relationships with other campaigns. And we put number 8 on here because especially if your candidate is trying to run as part of like a progressive or leftist block or a block of any sort where you're coordinating, where your messaging is kind of aligned with other folks who are running for similar positions, this sort of relationship building and maintaining is going to be really important.
If we have time later on, we can talk a little bit about experiences with working with other campaigns and some of those challenges. The things that come up and how to deal with the different types of campaigns. Yeah.
So how does this look? Do y'all have any questions about this? Seem like something feasible, doable? Cool.
Okay, so when we were thinking about how we wanted to structure this presentation, we figured that one of the most important things that a campaign manager has to do is come up with a campaign plan. And a campaign plan consists of all of these different factors that we're going to go into. And it's something that is one of the first things that you're going to come up with as a campaign manager with the candidate. And of course it is dynamic, so you will have to make adjustments. But it's important to have one, it's important to have it written down. It's important for various reasons. One, you want everyone on the campaign team to know the general strategy and what you're doing and have everyone on the same page, and also make them feel involved and recognize what their contribution is to the campaign. It's also important because it'll keep you on track, and when you have to make decisions about whether you're going to spend money on this or whether you're going to attend this certain event, you'll go back to the campaign plan and see how it fits in. It is also a requirement for some of your high profile, maybe like national endorsements that you're seeking. Most organizations, like Emily's List, will require you to submit your campaign plan. So, so it is really important. So it consists of these various sections, your strategy, your general, and this is kind of an overview. So this shouldn't be a 50-page document. It can be, but probably, I think one that I've worked on was maybe fewer than 10 pages. So your overview of your strategy, your general messaging, targeting, what your campaign organization looks like, your roles, brief summary overview of your community engagement field, communications, your plan to seek endorsements and how you're going to go about that, your budget, and your timeline. So really, campaign plan and budget are one of the first things that you'll do as a campaign manager. Come up with the campaign plan, come up with that budget. So we figured this is a good way to structure this presentation. We'll talk a little bit about each of these sections.
Sounds great.
And again, feel free to chime in whenever. Go ahead. Yeah, give it over.
Yep, you got it. Okay, so we're going to talk about strategy now, and my favorite part of the work I've done on campaigns, both in field organizing and managing Tim Denson's campaign, was talking about strategy as it relates to your philosophy for change. I think this is also something that campaigns need to do very early. Because yes, we're running to win, but why else? Why else are you running? Why else do you want to get into politics? And to me, that means running to build community. And so this, for the campaign I worked on with Tim, this community building strategy really, like, we agreed on it early, and that like bled into every aspect of the campaign. And because we both came out of community organizing, so we said, you know, campaigns should be about like changing the real material lives of people, and to do that you need to be connecting and talking with people. And then also running to influence discourse. So by this I mean, you know, maybe stating the more ambitious, bold ideas, to put them out there and to have them start circulating in the public conversation so that people know that things like this are possible. So I'm thinking now, like on the national scale, like you hear a bunch of the Democratic candidates running for president talking about reparations. Like that's not something like white candidates were talking about before, you know? And so it's really revolutionary. And so in what ways can your campaign be taking bold stances that might not meet necessarily the mainstream of the party, but what are you really trying to accomplish with your campaign? So this also includes political philosophy. And so the examples I'm giving here are from, again, my personal experience working with Tim. So we adhered to an inside-outside theory of change, which basically means political transformation comes on the inside, meaning that we need legislative policy change. We need to be influencing elections so that the people in power can make the kinds of changes that we're talking about. And then we also need outside pressure. So this is where social movements come in to sort of make some of that policy change possible. And so what this meant for our campaign was that we did want to work closely, and we wanted to inform our strategy by social movements and what people in social movement organizing were saying. And transformative organizing is kind of along these lines. So how can you frame your policy proposals or your platform within a broader, bolder vision for what you want the world to look like? So relational organizing is something I'll talk about in a little bit, so I'll kind of put a pin in that for now. All right. Do y'all have any questions about that? Thoughts, ideas?
And we'll talk a little bit about it when we talk about communication.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
Over here. There we go. Okay, so a second component of your strategy is really understanding your district, and you're going to do this by looking at three basic components. One is the history of your district races, so what has happened in the past like 3-4 elections. For some districts, there may not have been a Democratic candidate, so you won't have as much to go on, but you can still get information like, well, how much money did the opponent raise, and when was the last time a Democrat ran? And it may also be helpful to talk to those past candidates. You also want to do kind of some analysis, and this is something that the ACCDC candidate development team, until last year I was the deputy for candidate research, where our team did some of this analysis, district profiles. So we took, whatever district, like if it's U.S. House, 119, and looked at information, from Statistical Atlas, that's one source, and U.S. Census, on demographics, on industries, on issues that have come up, by looking at the newspapers in those areas. So it's both a mix of quantitative data and qualitative. So you want to kind of get a general idea of what your district looks like in terms of numbers, and then what are some issues that keep coming up in that district. So that's kind of your district profile. And then voter profiles.
that's kind of looking at what do the voters look like. We're not going to talk about Vote Builder because I know there's a whole other workshop on it. And if there are other things other than Vote Builder, if you look up voters, I'm not sure if you're going to talk about anything other than Vote Builder, but this is where you're trying to find like how many registered voters are there, what do their voting records look like. We know that in Georgia you can't register with a party, so you can't accurately identify that someone may be a Democrat or not, but there are other scores that you can use to kind of try to understand the district. Yeah, so that's the second main part of knowing the district. And the third is, talk about this? Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, is knowing the candidate, so as a campaign manager. And this goes into your campaign plan. When you're writing about it, you talk about this is who the candidate is. It's not really necessarily a resume, like this is the job they've had, but this is a little bit about their experience. This is what they stand for. These are some of their strengths. These are some weaknesses that may come up. This is how we're going to deal with them. So it also includes doing opposition research on your candidate. So when you accept the role as a campaign manager, one of the things, again, that you want to do early on is try to, if you're not going to do it personally, try to get someone to do opposition research on the candidate. Or if you're the candidate, do it on yourself. Think about what are some things that may come up. When I worked on one campaign, I looked through an opponent's, this was a couple of years ago, entire Twitter feed and found kind of some questionable tweets. Now, we never ended up using them, but it's always just good to, have that information. Anticipate the hard questions that may come up about the candidate, and it's also really important to know who your opponent is, because you'll include that in your campaign plan and how you plan on really dealing with them, whether you're going to ignore them. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that. Whether you're going to talk about them, if you are, how you're going to talk about them, whether you're going to plan to kind of stay under the radar and not mention their opponents. But there's information on your opponent's record, and I wanted to include some resources in case you didn't know them. You may already be aware of them, but VoteSmart is one resource where you can go and look at how, if your opponent is someone who's already in office, you can see, their voting record. Athens for Everyone does a really good job of also doing this with the local county commission seats. With this is how the county commissioners voted on certain issues, and then you can also go to the Georgia legislature on their website. They have, if you look at someone, you can see if they sponsored a bill. So here's VoteSmart. I just looked up Houston Gaines, and you just click. You search the person, and then you search on voting history. So you see there were 2 key votes that he voted on. One was about the abortion bill that we've been hearing a lot about, and he just hadn't voted, and then medical marijuana. So the VoteSmart's one, and then on, you can't really read this, can you? Okay, but this is where if you go to legis.ga.gov, and you can search for someone. You probably can't even see who I searched for. I searched for Marcus Vito. And these are all of the bills that he has sponsored. So you can look up someone, so you can look up your opponent. Yes?
There's another resource I would like to mention, but it's exclusively for national candidates.
Yeah.
It's called VoteView. And it provides some good information about, it's about their voting records, and it allows you to, it visualizes and provides some numbers about how they voted in relation to their own party and to their opposite party, and it tends to quantify their ideological position.
Okay, but it's only for congressional?
It's for Congress and Senate.
Okay.
So the national Congress. So it's good at looking at candidates and seeing how they align with their own party and I guess against the opposition party.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to for opposition research purposes, it's kind of helpful in that way.
VoteView. Okay, so VoteSmart, VoteView. All right, are there any other ones that you can think of?
If you go to ethics.ga.gov,
yes.
look through who's donated to them.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, yeah, and I think the fundraising committee does. All right.
All right, so also we're going to talk about strategy to win, because obviously if you're running, your goal is to win, even if another large part of why you're running is to influence discourse in a certain way. So that includes having a compelling, well-developed policy platform. And to me, that's why it's so important to very early on develop that philosophy for change, because that's really going to bleed into your messaging. How are you talking about the policy issues that you're concerned with? And I'm thinking, like, for example, just to give an example for transformative organizing, if that's what you're operating under. Let's say you're talking about, and maybe this isn't what you want to do, right? It depends on who's in your district. So this is just an example, not something I have experience with myself with this example. But for example, if you're talking about bail reform, and that's one of your policy platforms, a sort of transformative way to talk about bail reform is like, this is something that we're doing that we can accomplish right now. And then you could talk about how that gets you on the path toward the more liberatory goal that might be prison abolition, for instance. So figuring out how to sort of frame your policy goals within broader asks. Also, we're going to talk about win number and voter contact strategy in a little bit when we talk about targeting, but that's just something we wanted to mention briefly under strategy. Yeah.
About the platform, I've heard some people say that 3 platform planks is the best number. And I know that Tim doesn't follow that philosophy, and I think it works for him not following it, but I was wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, I think 3 as well. And so that's why for Tim's campaign, we actually ended up like mostly we had like 3 core ones, and then if you went to the website, then you could see like several other positions. And I think it is really important to take positions on things, even if they're not going to be one of your 3 core like talking points or policy priorities. To have in writing positions is really important. But yeah, I think the rule of 3 is good.
Yeah, I agree. And I know that can be tough.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
To really narrow it down. But I've seen candidates that were able to kind of list, kind of have it as a subsection, right? So it's not a whole other policy platform, but it goes under this, greater idea of like working against poverty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where do I point to?
I think you point it there. I'm sorry.
We were so excited when we found this yesterday, and now it's not working out too well. But
okay.
All right.
Can you push that forward, arrow?
Well, you're talking
The forward arrow.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Oh, there it goes.
Thank
you got it.
There we go. Okay. So one of the things that as a campaign manager you're going to work on with your candidate is messaging. Messaging. So this includes, all of the speeches that the candidate's going to do, your platform, everything goes on the website, everything related to, your social media, your events. So these are kind of components of your message. You want to talk about what the current problem is, so really what's going on now, and what are you trying to solve. So, we see in this district that we have, what was it last year, like a 38% poverty rate. So this is what you're trying to solve. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, you can just, and then who you are. Again, this doesn't have to be a long, this is my resume, I went to this high school, unless that may be relevant. So if you're a local, it may be important to talk about your roots in a particular district. What shapes your values? So frame issues around values, because that's kind of what voters connect to. Why are you running? And then what your solution is. So what is at stake? What your solution is. And finally, you definitely want the candidate, as a campaign manager, you want to make sure that they do this last part, which very often candidates don't do. So what are you asking the audience to do, right? So typically it's one of 3 things or all 3 things, right? So you want them to, you're asking for their vote. You may be asking for like a financial contribution or some other type of contribution, like to volunteer. But this is often missing, and it is an important one. And if your candidate, or if you're the candidate, if you're not comfortable doing that, then that's going to be a major hurdle. And then there's two other components that are really important in a message.
Yeah, so the things that I kind of touched on already, just extra considerations. One, being able to clearly articulate how your policy proposals affect people's everyday lives. And also, how do your concrete policy proposals plug into transformative change? So just two other considerations when you're planning your messaging.
All right. So as a campaign, you want something called a messaging portfolio that will consist of your talking points, of the message blocks that we're going to talk about in the next slide, that is, and then you want your different types of speeches. You've got your standard speech, so this is when you may encounter something like an embroidery or canvassing, maybe 30 seconds. You have your stump speech. Like occasionally we go to meetings and say, okay, are there any candidates in the room? And then a candidate says, oh, okay, fine, and then you get 2 minutes to talk about it. They should always be prepared and have that stump speech. And again, too often they're not prepared because they don't know that they're going to be called on. So that should be about 60 seconds. The short address is 2 minutes, and then the longer one, that's one that I was thinking of, the ACC-DC sometimes invites candidates to come and talk, and those tend to be 10 to 15 minutes, or it's a speech you may make at a fundraiser, at a house party. But this is all part of your messaging portfolio and that you work on when the candidate is a campaign manager.
And I'll say, as far as the messaging portfolio, I think it can be really hard to get candidates to write and rehearse speeches, especially if they've sort of been in political work for a while. Maybe they're like, oh, I know my stuff, I can just wing it, Oh, hi there. That's all right, come in. Welcome, you're fine. Have a seat wherever you'd like, name tags here. Of course. Yeah, so it can be quite difficult to get candidates to rehearse speeches, but again, especially given the time constraints and to make sure that you're staying on message and that you're being really cohesive and succinct, that's the best way you're going to get your message across. So that's a big role that the campaign manager plays, just supporting the candidate in going through, that speech. So.
Yeah, and another challenge that comes up is if the speech doesn't, because the candidate may not be the one who originally wrote the first draft. If the speech doesn't really kind of adhere to everything the candidate wants, it doesn't feel authentic, that could kind of be problematic. So as a campaign manager, you may have some ideas about what you think the speech should look like, but ultimately you're not the candidate, so the speech needs to kind of be something that the candidate feels comfortable with, because people will notice if it feels inauthentic.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so this is the messaging box that Lydia was mentioning. That's one part of the messaging portfolio. So this is sort of a table to help the campaign team assess 4 different things along the lines of messaging. So one being, what do we say about ourselves? So how's the campaign talking about who the campaign is and what it stands for? What does the campaign say about opponents? What are the opponents saying about our campaign and our candidate? And what are the opponents saying about themselves? So understanding all 4 of these is really important. And I'll give an example. So for Tim's campaign, we decided pretty early on that we were not interested in talking about the opponents unless we were specifically asked. Instead, we wanted to focus on what our candidates' qualifications were and what their plans and ideas were, because it can get easy to sort of drift into what the opponent's messaging is and becoming reactive. And so we thought, nope, it's best for us to just be more proactive and talk about what our candidate is bringing to the table. So that's an important decision that the campaign manager will have to make in concert with the campaign team and the candidate.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So even if you decide never to talk about the opponent or the other candidates, you still want to be prepared for what they're going to say about themselves, and because it may affect how you talk about how you're different.
And like people are going to ask. The press is going to ask.
Yep.
You're going to get asked to sort of respond to something that your opponent is doing. So being prepared to respond to that, even if you're not the one initiating that conversation, is important.
Yeah, and in a primary or in a nonpartisan race, this is kind of even more important because the other candidates may be people that you kind of agree with ideologically for the most part. So it'll be important to know how you differ because voters will ask, okay, well, you're both, like Democrats, how do you differ? Right? Versus in a general election, the contest is more clear. Okay, targeting. Yes. We're not going to talk too much about it because I think this is going to fall under field, but it is an important component of your campaign plan. So very broadly, what is targeting? I'm sure most people in here probably don't already know this, but the general public sometimes doesn't know that a campaign doesn't try to talk to everyone. Right? It's impossible to talk to all of the voters in a district because you always have scarce resources. So you don't have enough time, you don't have enough money, and you don't have enough volunteers. So you want to target and talk to the people who will help you win, right? You want to get the message to the right voters. You don't want to activate, if you, the Republican base, so you don't want to talk to people, and you really don't want to talk to the Republican base because they're not going to vote for you, so again, you're just wasting your resources. So targeting is kind of an efficient allocation of your resources, of the people, and the time and money. Okay, so this is all from Wellstone. But one thing you want to do, Avery, are you going to talk about?
Yeah, I'm
stuff?
actually going to cover quite a bit of this.
Okay. So should I could. Okay, I'll just go through it very quickly.
Well, you do what you need to do.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the one thing that you need to work out as a campaign manager with your field director is calculating your Democratic Performance Index, and that is how the Democratic vote has performed in last elections. No, it doesn't have to do with voter registration because we don't have party registration in Georgia. So if you look at the last 3 similar elections, you find, well, what vote went Democratic in the first one, and then you take the average and divide it by 3. So then you determine your DPI, and then you calculate.
So I wouldn't worry too much about this. And for the people in this room, if you look at Georgia's history in the last 18 years in voter registration, the single largest jump in voter registration was actually in 2018, where it went up by almost 10%, which changes how you would do this. So this won't really apply moving forward.
Okay.
So I'll discuss that and tell you why, but the 2018 midterms really messed up the historic performances in all the races.
Okay, because it's gone up. Okay, and then, well, the next slide talks about projected turnout, and I did include that you should, account for the turnout changing again, right? Because, account for an increase in that. But, all right, but very broadly, you typically do want to calculate something which is the projected turnout, which is based on the turnout in the last, however many elections you count, multiplied by the current voter registration. So if no new people registered to vote, which you can expect that would change. And then that's how you calculate your win number. And we won't talk about the win number because there'll be another workshop on it. But your win number has to deal with your projected turnout. And then if you have that and you add 1, that means that you have 1 more vote, right? More than 50%, that's how you win. It's nice to have a cushion, so you should try to aim for a vote goal of 52%. And Okay, I'm gonna skip. So your projected Democratic turnout is your turnout multiplied by the Democratic index. But what happens, and I wanted to open it up, what happens if you calculate this and you see how many current registered voters there are, or current voters, and your projected Democratic turnout is lower than your vote goal? Like, what would you do?
You need to cross an independents and you need like lead Republicans.
Okay, so that's like one strategy to try to appeal, if you can correctly identify people who you think, who may not appear Democratic, but you think they could vote. Okay.
Turn out more people than is expected.
Register more people. Help people register.
Right. And you know, typically they say campaigns shouldn't really, well, there's also the legality, right? You can't like register people as part of the campaign officially. But they'll say campaigns shouldn't really waste resources doing that because it's so difficult to get someone to register to vote and then not only register to vote, to turn out to vote if they've never voted before, and then to vote for you. So there are lots of steps. But yeah, any other, I mean, I don't have the answers. I just, what do you do? Do you say, okay, this is definitely not winnable, we just can't win this?
You could demoralize the opposition.
Okay, yeah. So try to make sure that their supporters don't turn out.
Yeah.
Take this as an invitation to push the boldest policies possible.
Yeah, so know that, you know, what Briana was talking about, like influencing discourse. So even if you aren't sure that you can win, at least make sure that your platform is heard, right? And try to really influence the electorate and start to get them thinking about bold issues. Yep. All right. Again, I think this is the final slide that I have on targeting, but you know, once you determine your win number, you then do the targeting, which is kind of try to identify. You can do this at the precinct level, depending on the size of your race. You can identify precincts that are like leaning Democratic and focus on them. Use them to gather your base early on. Maybe use some of those people to recruit on your campaign as volunteers. And you may decide to completely avoid Republican-based precincts. And again, with the swing precincts, you may have a slightly different message. But anyway, you determine all of these numbers and know that they're not exact and they change. And like Avery said, that because of 2018, when you're looking at the past elections to determine all these things, projected turnout, Democratic turnout, win number, that it's not going to be like a perfect science. But you will have people who will ask you, have you determined it? So it's almost like you calculate these to just show that you're serious. And endorsements, again, may ask you just to know that you have thought about these numbers, even though it's not.
If I may, I think that's the biggest thing to point out to them is if you're pursuing endorsements, applications are going to be asking you for your win numbers, and like it's not so much for your campaign strategy as it is for trying to get the donations and endorsements.
Right. Yeah. I think it's just to show that you've been thinking of really get the endorsements. Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Any questions? And I know some of it is kind of. Like, it's not the most fun stuff, but
Oh, no, it's a vote builder question.
okay. Are you attending the vote builder?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So now we're going to talk about team building, and by this I mean sort of like building strong relationships among your campaign team members. So as we mentioned in the campaign manager roles, one of your roles is going to be coaching and supporting the candidate. So this includes providing feedback on speeches, something I talked about a little bit already, and holding the candidate accountable about strategy and messaging. And those conversations can not always be fun to have if maybe your candidate is wanting to go in this other direction. It's like, wait, but didn't we decide this, and here's why. And also seeking out resources and trainings when necessary. There are lots of organizations and networks that candidates and campaign team members can plug into to get resources and additional training. So, keeping an eye on what those opportunities might be and pursuing them if that feels necessary. Also, hiring, training, supporting, and communicating with the campaign team. So by training, I mean a strong onboarding program and political education. I think there, unfortunately, is such a thing as having people volunteer for a campaign and not really be totally on board or understand like what the messaging is or the policy ideas. And then like that, they can do real damage talking to voters about the campaign because perhaps they don't have like the level of understanding necessary to sort of convey the message that in a way that aligns with the political philosophy and strategy. So, doing this sort of very early on and that also shows like investment in the people that are working with you. At the end of the day, someone working on a campaign, it shouldn't be just a transactional relationship. We should be really trying to build the capacity of that volunteer or that campaign team member, and that does have a political education component. And then also being open to like feedback from the people working on your campaign. Presumably they're working on it because they're also invested in what your candidate has to offer and the type of future that your team is putting forth. So, actively seeking their input and advice to like co-create the, direction of the campaign together if possible. By support, I mean be accessible to your campaign team members and check in regularly about what they might be needing but not necessarily saying. Are there additional supports they need from you? Are there questions that are going unanswered? Just sort of creating a regular space for checking in is really important. And then also we're all human and like personal stuff comes up in our lives and we need to be like thinking differently about our working environments to where we can be open and honest about what's going on with us, because that can impact what our work life, what we're able to contribute. So creating an environment where people on your campaign team feel comfortable doing that, I think is really important. For communication, I think this includes having clear goals and expectations. So one thing we did for Tim's campaign, for instance, we had like descriptions of the roles, to take it very seriously and let people know exactly what they're expected to do, what the goals are and why. This also includes hosting regular campaign meetings, whether that's, I think the regularity of those is going to change as the campaign progresses, of course. Establishing a communication platform where there are some really awesome ones like Slack that we'll talk about, or Basecamp, where you can assign and follow up on action items and link deadlines to them and things like this. So, pursue some of those communication tools that are going to make it easier for y'all to talk to each other.
I wanted to mention that often the campaign manager is the only paid position on the team. So you're managing, and supporting a group of volunteers. So it's really important to be appreciative and I recognize that they are probably going to use that experience and then move on to another campaign and leadership roles. So you're part of their political education. Kind of think about that and support them any way you can. Here, this is, it is blurry, but this is Slack, and it's just an example of the campaign that I worked on and all of the different channels that we use. So we have a channel for calendar, channel for communications, and so there were different people on, you can follow all the channels, but not everyone did. So, the fundraising team followed the fundraising, but they didn't follow the Hustle, which is the text messaging app. And then right here, that's my account. So I had some private channels where not everyone on the campaign team had access, because not everyone needed to know information about Act Blue. So that was just like the treasurer and I think it's just me and the treasurer. Anyway, so this is a good way to kind of communicate on a daily basis, and then when you have your weekly meetings, you can kind of go back and make sure that the action items that you talk about on Slack, if that's what the platform they're going to use, are addressed. It's also important to emphasize to the team to be discreet. They're probably going to find out information that could be sensitive about the candidate and or even the opponent that we don't want to, if like an opponent's affair comes out, not comes out, you hear about it, but you decide as a campaign, there's no point in talking about this, because it doesn't have to do with policy. You don't want a campaign, someone on the team to talk about it, and then all of a sudden it looks as if the campaign kind of is talking about it, right? Because they do represent the campaign. So it is important for them to be discreet about information that they may find out during their meetings or even during these Slack conversations.
Okay, so I already mentioned the regular campaign meetings and check-ins. Also, practicing adaptability, I think, is really important, again, for the reasons I already mentioned and that Lydia phrased even more wonderfully, that a lot of the people on your campaign team are going to be volunteers. So stuff is going to come up, balls are going to be dropped, and how can we, instead of sounding the alarm and making it an urgent crisis, figure out how to take the most elegant next step, as Adrienne Maree Brown says, one of my favorite authors, and like proceed anyway through something that is sort of perceived as a barrier. Express gratitude. So yeah, this is so important, especially to build for building a like cohesive internal campaign culture. Show appreciation to your volunteers, to donors, to supporters, to the receptionist at the building where you got to rent a room. I mean, to the person that catered for your thing. Like, all of these people are what is making it possible for you to run a successful campaign. So show gratitude, whether through thank you cards or personal messages. I think it really means a lot, and it makes people want to keep working alongside you. So I think that's really important. I already mentioned regularly assessing individual needs and capacity, and also the needs and capacity of the group at any given time. And celebrate the small stuff. Campaigning can be like really draining. Stuff comes up that isn't exactly exciting or anticipated. And so it's really important to just celebrate every little win. But I mean, you can really turn like almost anything into like a cause or reason to celebrate. So I encourage you to be creative about ways to do that with your campaign team. So this is something we actually did after the campaign. We had a volunteer thank you barbecue at Tim's house. And it was just a way to say, like, even though the campaign is over, like, we value you and we still value these relationships and we want to continue to build them and work together. And so this was a way to sort of like maintain those connections. And there's still a lot of folks that volunteered on the campaign that we are working with in various capacities today. So these can be like lifelong relationships.
Yeah. And the campaign that I worked on, we did monthly potlucks that were great. And a lot of the student interns that worked on that ended up becoming, I mean, they were brilliant people. They ended up becoming my research assistants in my day-to-day job because I knew how brilliant they were. So I've continued, relationships with them, and Athens is a small community. So yeah, the way you treat people, like, word will get around if you're not being good to your campaign team.
Definitely. So I included this bit on relational organizing, which is something that Southerners on the ground has done some work around and really embodies as an organization. Southerners on New Ground is a queer liberation community organizing group that organizes all throughout the South, that's based in Atlanta. And relational organizing says basically that to have the type of community organizing that is going to lead to liberation, we need to prioritize relationship building within that community organizing structure. So whether that's external facing, whether you're talking about a group of people are going out in the community and working with folks in the community to make something happen, or internally as far as group dynamics, and that's how I want to talk about it here. Group dynamics among a campaign team can embody relational organizing. And this includes, sorry, can you go back? Thanks. Yeah, thank you for doing that, I appreciate it. So this includes base building, which is basically developing a shared vision for an intersectional politics, political education, which we talked about a little bit already. So building critical thinking and principled struggle rather than just sort of ascribing to the banking model of education, which is just like, feeding things to people and letting them consume it as a, it's sort of a more transactional relationship. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about political education. And issue identification. So in the campaign team setting, this is like naming and defining problems and struggles that might be emerging within the group, and having sort of processes in place to address those. So if someone has an issue with the way things are happening, like cultivating an environment to where those things can be brought up and addressed. Thanks.
Is now a good time for a break?
Yes. All right. And maybe you'll think of questions, so we'll start with questions after. Related to team building or really whatever else. Or if you have any questions, yeah, go ahead.
Going to restaurants together, going to places in your community, being seen, making yourselves even known in churches or restaurants or any public place, performances, plays, theater, whatever you can. Get yourself out there. Wear t-shirts that have glitter on them.
Yep. Go dance.
All right, cool, thank you. Any other ideas or questions? All right.
Okay. Like I mentioned before the break, last year there was a workshop on just campaign roles and responsibilities, and that was like a 2-hour workshop. So there is a lot here, but I won't go over it in that much detail. Not every position will be relevant for your campaign, so it depends what race you're running for, and there may be other positions that I forgot to put up here, so let me know if you've worked on a campaign and there was a role that wasn't on here. But very generally, you have the candidate, and the candidate has two main responsibilities. They have to fundraise and they have to ask for votes. And if they can't do that, then the campaign's in trouble. But they also attend community campaign events. However, they're still the two main goals: fundraise, ask for votes. The campaign manager, so this is what we've been talking about, so I won't go into all of the responsibilities again. The treasurer is often the only other person that will appear officially on the campaign. So if you're running for State House and you look at the website, you'll see the campaign, you'll see the candidate and then the treasurer. This position is really important because the treasurer makes sure that all of your records are in compliance and you don't want the campaign to get in trouble. So ideally it would be someone with an accounting or a finance background, but they maintain the financial records, they manage the bank account, and really oversee everything that has to do with finances. This is separate from the fundraising director, but they do work. All right, and again, stop me whenever, yeah. Okay, the next person. Okay, Avery, thank you. I'm so sorry. I said you were off the hook, but you're not. Is the fundraising director. This person oversees all of the fundraising So they develop the call sheets that the candidate will use to make the calls. They will manage the call time. Doesn't necessarily mean that they will be the one sitting down with the candidate, but call time is when a candidate is sitting making calls, and there's someone sitting next to them taking notes about each call. Okay, talk to so-and-so, asked for this much money, they pledged this much, and they have to keep the candidate on task because the candidate often does not want to do this. It is not fun to call up people and ask for money. So having a call time assistant is important. And they'll want to spend a lot of time talking about each call, and you say, no, we're not going to waste our time. Let's go and move on to the next person. But they manage the call time, and they oversee all the fundraising events. This is something that some campaigns may have or may not have, but it's a house party / fundraising event coordinator. So they identify individuals in the community who are willing to host like a house party or a fundraiser, and they kind of work out all of those logistics and figure out, the invitations and the food and the drink. So kind of anyone who has any like party planning experience might enjoy this and feels comfortable kind of talking to people. And they're also responsible for having, they either do it or have a team that will collect contributions at an event. All right. Your communications director is really important because they manage everything that has to do with the media. So any press, any interviews that the candidate will do, communications director manages all of that. They set up media interviews. They are typically like the point of contact. Now, there may not be a communications director, or maybe the campaign manager does that, but this could be a separate role if the campaign is large enough. They help develop the speeches and all of the literature, the direct mailers, and the web content, and oversee the social media activities, although they'll typically have other people working and reporting to them that work, on just like Facebook or Twitter or the website. But they oversee all of that. Any questions? Okay. The field director. I loved this part, so I loved being field director. And this is really an important part, and it's beyond just kind of thinking about numbers and how you're going to get them. You really develop the plan to reach the voters. So that may be through canvassing or calling or attending events or writing postcards. And you also are responsible for cutting the turf and vote builder and figuring out where you're going to send your volunteers and who they're going to talk to. You manage all the data. And you typically send weekly reports to the campaign manager so they know kind of what's going on, who are they reaching, what are people saying, how's the message being received to the people that you're targeting. And they'll also coordinate the Get Out the Vote effort. Although, again, in a really large campaign, you may have someone who just does Get Out the Vote, because that's a huge, like you could have a whole workshop on Get Out the Vote strategy. But it may be just the field director. And I know you're probably going to talk about some stuff there. The volunteer coordinator is also something I love doing. It is probably the most time-consuming position other than campaign manager. Volunteer coordinator, like you need to, I don't know, take them out to dinner or do something for them like consistently, because it is a lot of work. So they work with the field director to implement the direct voter contact plan. They have to recruit volunteers, which can be tough. They need to, manage the volunteers and figure out like whose talents and skills can be used in what. So they may discover that a volunteer is really good at photography, so they can help with the photography, or someone's really great at the phone, so and overseeing people, so they might put a volunteer in charge of the phone banking. They also have to be in charge of really motivating volunteers and retaining them, keep them coming back. So once they volunteer one time, try to set them up to volunteer again. And Briana mentioned earlier that there is like volunteer drop-off, people, it's a lot of work. And so the volunteer coordinator has to kind of either identify new people or try to retain them. And are there any like strategies that you've seen like in campaigns you've worked on to has anyone worked as a volunteer coordinator? Yeah. What were some strategies that you used to really be successful? Because this is crucial. Without enough volunteers, you can have a lot of money, right, fundraise, but if you don't have people, talking to your voters, that'll be a problem.
So, I was regional field coordinator for the To Defeat Amendment 1 in 2016, and that was actually like also volunteer coordinator, and because that was a regional position, I was supposed to be like recruiting and developing volunteers for like several counties. And so I found something that was really helpful was like building like a couple really strong connections in those communities and have those people sort of be like ambassadors for the campaign and like help bring in their friends or people they know, because obviously I live in Athens, so when I went to Hall County, people didn't necessarily feel like connected to me or wanting to like help me out, you know what I mean? And so having that like volunteer recruitment come from people in the community that you're organizing in is really important. And that's really tough too. I'm glad you love volunteer coordinating so much. I had such a hard time. Yeah. But I mean, I think, it's possible. And so I think finding those local point people is really important.
Yeah, I almost think that next year maybe this could have like a whole presentation on this, because this is on the volunteer one. I mean,
but because they work with the field director, kind of. Yeah.
Just because it's so important and it's so difficult,
hard.
And I don't think it gets the attention that like some of these other ones get positions. Because I have no idea how to do this. Like volunteers come and go, and like how do you get them to? So me personally, I'm clueless on this one.
I always found it was really important to have very concrete like next steps. So anytime I'm tabling and getting volunteers, to have specific dates and times to get people, and don't let people leave without getting them more. I think vague volunteer lists get lost.
And another thing I just remembered. I'm sorry. Precinct captains is kind of what I was thinking of. So because you're in Athens, having a volunteer who will rise up to the level of a precinct captain who will know people and folks that they can get from another county or another, I guess it could be county captains as well. During the special election, I remember volunteers coming to me and saying, "Oh, I'm so glad you have things for us to do and that you're organized." And I thought, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, we worked on a campaign and we just show up and the campaign didn't tell us what to do. This wasn't a campaign in Athens. I'll just mention which one it was. It was Ossoff's, John Ossoff's campaign. And he said, we felt like we weren't being useful because it would take like 30 minutes for them to kind of tell them where to go, and then they would give them a turf that they actually had given someone the previous day, and so volunteers kind of don't get demoralized when things like that. So I think it's really important for the volunteer coordinator to be really well organized and to have things ready for people to do so that they feel like they're really making a difference.
And everyone wants to volunteer a week or even a few days before the election. We actually need to do 3 months ago, but nobody wants to volunteer then.
Right, yeah. So I guess, one thing that the volunteer coordinator has to do, I guess, is try to, from the summer, try to kind of highlight how important it is that the work that they're doing months before the election. Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to mention one other thing that a lot of the campaigns that we coordinated with talked about is when you have lots of different campaigns and in a general election, how do you manage burnout among people who they just don't have time to volunteer on, the 2 state house and the state senate and the U.S. House and so how do you not dissuade them from volunteering on other campaigns, but try to convince them to also volunteer on your campaign? And I don't really have any good answers about that, but if anyone does, it is something to think about when you're kind of almost fighting, but not for the same volunteers. Francis, do you have any?
No, I don't, but except for I remember for the November election,
Yeah.
there was a lot of talk about having a campaign manager.
You did talk about that.
A person who, or potentially that would help in this area. So somebody who was helping communication among the Democratic candidates. So, and then some of that would include the field work. So, you know, for example, right, I think probably during Get Out the Vote, my friend and I were out canvassing, I think, for Jonathan, and we ran into in the same neighborhood a couple of kids who were out campaigning for somebody else. And so we were like, oh, well, here, take some of our material. We'll take some of your material and let's divide up. Why don't you go here and we're going to go there? And so we just spontaneously ran into each other and decided that by saving time, we could help each other that day, just that day with the neighborhood that we were in. And so having somebody who was overseeing that coordination among Democratic campaigns, I think would be really invaluable. I don't know whatever happens with that, but that would help with this. Just so with volunteers. So you're sending volunteers out to talk about every Democratic candidate, not just your Democratic candidate.
And I'll say something after Ed. Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Sorry, slight bit of a change. I was just going to ask. I know it gets into a separate issue really quickly about the effectiveness of it didn't go the way we wanted to, but how did you and Avery and Karina, how did y'all feel about doing the walk cards that had almost every candidate on there? It made me as a volunteer feel better. Like I didn't feel like I was betraying, Karina and then Dawn's campaign by not doing it for something with them because I had a card that had everybody on it. How did y'all feel like it felt from a volunteer management side of things? Did it help reduce burnout, or what do you think?
Avery, what do you think? So the two state senate, so state senate 46, state senate 47, U.S. House, not U.S., state house 117 and 119, kind of we coordinated and we had like a slate card with all the candidates, including higher level. So Stacey Abrams and I can't remember.
Tabitha. 10.
Yeah.
10
So
was on
congressional,
there.
yeah. And we also
Nine
coordinated
and 10.
another way. We had postcard parties where all the four campaigns came together and wrote postcards. But Avery, what was your take?
Yeah, so ideally, you're going to have very engaged and politically active people who do care about like the state house or who do care about the state senate. But the truth is, a large portion, a big bulk of the voters who are going to turn out are there for the top ticket. So when you are out there, like we have volunteers for the state house, if we have cards for the state senator and we have cards for the congressman or woman and we have cards for the governor as well, that actually helps the smaller races. So you want to think of it like ideally a Russian doll, right? Like stacked, like you want that top ticket. We actually wanted the state senators on ours because it actually helps improve turnout.
Yeah, and I did hear that volunteers did enjoy, maybe because they felt like they weren't, that they were helping all campaigns at once rather than have to go on 4 separate. But one issue is that there's only, when you're cutting turf, only one campaign, you're visiting the voters of one campaign and only one campaign has that information. So then the other campaigns kind of lose the information. They don't know if you would be targeting the same people and they don't have information on what, who you contacted, what they said. So that is a problem. And I'm not sure really how to do that. All right, other positions. Oops. Oh, a little bit, the next one. So your research and policy director, again, depending on the size of your campaign, you may not have someone who's doing that. The campaign manager or the communications director may do some of that. But they coordinate the research on your platform and the district issues. Often UGA students are really good to be on this team. They really enjoy and know a lot about policy issues. But the research director also oversees the opposition research. So looks at the vote record of the opponents and all the other things. And maybe some of their like dirty laundry, which again you probably won't use, but it's good to have that information anyway. They help prepare the candidate for the forums and the debates along with the communications director, and they build relationships with different constituency groups and the community to organize their involvement and try to get them involved with the team. It's important that the campaign manager, even though there's someone who's doing this, like if it's a separate person, it's important that they're kind of on the same page as the candidate and the campaign manager about what the issues are, and if they're kind of going on and saying, look, this is what we're talking about, and it doesn't flow with what you wrote in your campaign plan and platform, that could be an issue. So it is important to keep this consistent. Okay, the next person is an important person, and I've done this as well. It is the body person. So if you watch on Veep, this is Gary Walsh. So the body person is someone who attends everything with the candidate. So this may be the campaign manager, but the campaign manager is really busy. So if there's someone else who kind of enjoys doing it and kind of likes going to places, and it's a good role for them. So they go over to the candidate. They will carry, any campaign materials like literature, but also things like buttons, to pass out. They make sure that the candidate, has food and drink, and that if they're going to make a speech, they make sure that the microphone's working, make sure, that the clicker's working, things like that. Although they probably won't use a PowerPoint, and they make sure the candidate works the room. So it's someone who really knows everyone, and they think, okay, the candidate should really talk to so-and-so, and they'll make that happen. So they'll, either go and tell the candidate you need to come over there, or they'll talk to someone and say, oh, I should introduce you to, the candidate. So it's someone who's kind of comfortable in Sarah's end. Yeah, I've done it. It's fun. Has anyone? And the position is called body man, but I didn't like that, so vintage body person. But it's also kind of personal assistant. Yeah, and it's also a way to get the, you don't want the candidate going to places alone. I remember one example, the candidate was asked to go and speak at a group, but it was a kind of a conservative group, and the person went alone. And then they felt really, attacked because there were lots of really tough questions, and there was no one there to kind of, even just kind of nod and smile, like, you keep going. So it's always good to never send your candidate, especially to kind of a group that may be not the most friendly. That's your body person.
Can you say a little more about the extra clothing?
Oh, the extra clothing. Sorry. Yes. Well, if you're going to an event, there's probably going to be food, and there's also the possibility of, spilling, and there'll probably be people taking photos, and you don't want your candidate kind of looking a mess. So you typically carry an extra clothing that is the same, so it's like another white shirt, just to kind of, and I think Gary did that. That's why I thought of him. And this person should also kind of, be dressed well, I guess. But
depends on what your strategy is.
It depends what the strategy is. That's really important. I guess should resemble the candidate. So like the similar kind of, image. Okay, any other questions about the body person? Anyone think they want to serve that? Danny.
In the 70s, we used to call it the advanced person. Is that the same thing?
Oh, what is that? Advanced?
You go to the room and
in advance,
sure
yes.
Everything's
yes, you make sure.
No landmines, no whatever.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Right, you go and kind of check the room before, right? So if it's a debate, you'll know, okay, you'll be seated over there, but we don't want to move you over here because, I don't know, this is your, I don't know, it'd be better if you're, it's called an advanced person.
Well, back in the McGovern days.
All right. Okay.
Did you say that you resemble a candidate?
Oh, not I meant like in what they wear, kind of a general.
Like, don't be more dressed up than.
Don't be more dressed as the candidate, but if the candidate wants to go with this formal thing, like this is what they're about, then you shouldn't like show up in a t-shirt.
campaign t-shirt.
Yeah.
Assist the candidate in presenting the image that they want to present.
Yeah, yeah. That's right. Not that they should resemble. Okay, and okay, the scheduler, if again, and someone else may fill that, but it's someone who's responsible for accepting all the invitations. They never put something on the schedule without really consulting with the campaign manager, but the candidate is going to be invited to a lot of things, and the candidate and campaign manager need to decide together what events they're going to say yes to and what events they may turn down. And it's not always based on the number of people, so even if you say, well, there are only going to be 5 people, so I don't want to waste the candidate's time. If those are 5 important people, then, or if it's community members that are often neglected, then it's important to attend that event. But anyway, they bring these events up to the campaign manager and the candidate, and then set them, and then they make sure, because they have access to the calendar, they make sure that call time is respected. So on your calendar, you should have, call time, and nothing else should be booked during call time. Now the candidate will often try to get out of it and say, oh, I hear there's this event, I just won't make calls that day. No, try to get them to stick to their call time, because, yeah, I guess everyone wants to avoid making call time.
What if you schedule the wrong people?
Excuse me?
What if you schedule the wrong people that misrepresent themselves when they call for a scheduled meeting?
Scheduling,
Like they call your office, right?
Yeah.
They want to have a meeting with you, but then, probably from the opposition,
so this is everything, a meeting for the candidate. So where the candidate should go.
Okay.
Not necessarily to schedule meetings with the candidate is what I'm thinking, right?
Yeah,
Like
so are you asking, like, if there's a situation where someone calls and they're, like, pretending, like...
Right,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, I guess it's hard to, I don't know, I've never heard of that happening, but, like, I could...
On a local retail level, though, a lot of Old South people do want to call the candidate and say, I want to speak to you for half an hour. And, you can't do that with everybody, but maybe early on or 9 months before the election.
So some would try to ambush the candidate, though, to embarrass them.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
What do you do in that position?
I don't know. I don't have any good advice on what to do. Yeah. What would you?
We had somebody that called our campaign, and they wanted 50-yard signs. And they said they'd hand them out over in Bogart in their area.
Oh.
And I thought that was a little suspicious.
Yeah.
So we looked them up, and in every primary and general for the last 14 years, they voted Republican.
Oh.
So
did you just say, I'm sorry, we don't have...
we just said, we'll see if we can put you on the schedule, thanks, and then never followed back up with that person. But that's the only thing we've ever had.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I haven't had any weird things like that happen, so...
So I guess that one answer would be maybe this person
does research.
Could do a little double checking.
Yeah, do research on every
event,
request and invitation. Yeah.
I had one of Brian Kemp's cronies follow me, pulling up yard signs going back as far as 2002. So it happens. So go back and check your yard signs.
Yeah.
An hour later.
Wow. Yeah, I guess these things do happen. Okay, and then, I just put interns here, but obviously these interns work in all areas of the campaign. These are just interns that I've used, to do research on policy, and I'm a little bit older. I don't think technically I count as a millennial, so I'm not very good with social media, and a lot of students are really great at that. So social media gurus, they are can help with that, or photography, videography, and they're also your link to any student constituency groups that you may want to talk to, like the Young Dems, Democrats of Georgia. And did you use interns in any other ways, or kind of for any volunteer coordination? They are also a good resource because they can possibly get other students to come out and volunteer. And finally, I have one more, and I don't know if I missed any positions. You let me know. But this is your board of advisors, so they're not officially on your campaign staff, but it is useful to reach out to these people throughout the campaign, but it's really important to do it early on, even before you, have really running, hit the ground running. These are community leaders, political activists, possibly past candidates for the same position, and maybe current legislators that will help you with all sorts of things like your messaging, your platform, who might be good people to fill these roles. They may have, experience with speeches. I know some of the people who are working on who are presenting the other workshops may be good people to put on your advisory board. And that's all the positions. Can you think of any other ones that?
I can't. This is way more than than we had for a local.
Well, and again,
so
maybe for county commission, you may not need all those, or you have one person filling a lot of these. Any other
so
people?
This is ideal world.
Yeah, and this is kind of again from Wellstone, but they are work positions that I've worked on.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess in terms of scalability, just going from a county commission race up to U.S. Congress, is it better maybe to think about these as being things that need to be done?
Yes, it's good.
It doesn't matter how many people you have.
It doesn't matter how many people you have. Right. Yes. So I've worked on a campaign with 10 people. I've worked on a campaign with 19 staff, and I guess my smallest would have probably been maybe 4. Yeah. But yes, these are areas that need to be covered. So if one person can do it, and it's a lot of stuff, a lot of different things, a lot of different roles and responsibilities. Okay, any other questions about campaign roles? Okay. Let me try. Ooh, did I do that or did you do it? I did it. Okay. I did it.
Don't get too excited.
I got too excited. All right, Briana.
All right, so we're going to talk sort of quickly about community engagement. I'll talk a little bit about exploratory committee meetings. Lydia's going to talk about field, and then we'll mention community events and communication, like constituent communication. Thank you. Okay, so what I've called exploratory committee is basically what Lydia said about advisory board. It's sort of the same idea. So these are folks that you bring together pretty early on, before you've even declared your candidacy. So ideally you want to start building relationships as early as possible. These early meetings are with community members and constituencies that are core to your vision, and this is important so that you can formulate your strategy and plan with those folks, with the community. This was something for Tim's campaign. It was very aligned with our community engaged approach to campaigning. So that meant we brought people. We had the first meeting with this group in the summer of 2017. And Tim didn't announce until September of 2017. And in these meetings, it's important to consider who do you want in this exploratory committee? Who do you want in the room as you're sort of co-creating your plan and your goals and all of that? Is it people with specific expertise who represent particular constituency groups? How often are you going to meet? So we met once a month until the until Tim announced. So it was really like 3 or 4 meetings, I think. But then these folks really did serve like in an advisory capacity in a lot of ways throughout the campaign. So that's another thing to consider. What are you asking of this group? Are you saying I want to meet with you once a month for 3 months and then like that's it? Or is it, you know, just let people know like kind of what they're getting into, what you're expecting of them. Are you then hoping that they'll join the campaign team in a certain way? And that'll be different depending on like for different people. So yeah, just some considerations.
A question about that. For smaller districts, like in Athens, committee members, what is should they all be in your district, across the district? That's a question I have. Any thoughts on that?
I think a mix of both. So at the county commission level, while you very much want people in that room at those meetings that live in the district and can talk to you about district-specific problems, that's super important. You also want people from across Athens, because at the end of the day, commissioners are making policy decisions for the entire community. So I think I'd say both are important.
And maybe it doesn't have to be from the same district. I would say from the same part of town, maybe. Like on the east side, like does anyone really know where the lines are drawn? You know, but they know like I'm from the east side. You know.
Yeah. That's an important thing. The district lines are so arbitrary, and like a vast majority of people have no idea what commission district they're in.
And the Board of Education districts are slightly different than the county commission districts.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think it's a good idea to still have some people in the, people politically engaged in the district that want to talk about some issues. So this was our agenda for our first meeting on June 16th. So we did introductions, we talked about why we're all in this room together, what we're hoping to get out of it. We worked on a timeline and sort of brainstormed some potential scenarios that might come up through the course of the campaign. We outlined the district, and by this I mean we like sort of, we were like looking at a map, we were looking at, specific, basically kind of creating the district profile that Lydia mentioned. Thinking about what businesses are there, what parks are there, what schools, what churches, all of these things. And we also in that, did we do all that? Well, we did part of it. Yeah, that's kind of what we were trying to get at. And in the last part, we talked about the issues and did some collective visioning. So that was space for people in the room to go around and talk about what they care about and what they were hoping to see Tim stand for. And that really influenced the platform. The other meetings, July, we were talking about the spirit of the campaign, so that being like messaging and tone. In August, our goal was to talk about building a campaign team and cultivating a network of support. So yeah, just wanted to show you that example.
I think it's really important to be able to say that your platform came from people in the district, right? So these aren't just ideas that you just came up with, but you really listened and you've spoken to potential voters, and this is what they care about. Also, the date is really important if you go back. So this was a year, almost a year before the election. So this needs to happen, early on, right? Because this is June 16, 2017, right? Yeah, and the election was May 22nd, 2018. So,
yeah,
so
2017. 2017.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and depending on the relationships that you already have in the community, that sort of thing might need to happen even earlier. So it just kind of depends on where you're at as a candidate. So I just included this quote from Adrienne Marie Brown, who I already mentioned. She's a community organizer and a pleasure activist. She says that conversation is a crucial way to explore what we believe and to make new understandings and ideas possible. So the sooner we can start those conversations with the community and with people in the district that we're trying to serve, the better.
Yeah, and I know that ACCDC, we're thinking, like the candidate development team, we're thinking about doing like off-year canvassing and like going and reaching out to voters and talking to them and seeing what issues they care about. And hopefully this will help inform campaigns next year. We can say, hey, NCCDC went and spoke to these people, and these are things they talked about, and you can use this in your campaign. Now, we'll be obligated to share that with all primary candidates, so all Democratic candidates will receive that information. Okay, field. All right. So I'm not going to go into this deeply since there is a workshop on it, but as a campaign manager, you'll be working with the field director and make sure that they cover kind of these main areas. You want to identify your core supporters, and you want to do that early because you want to build that base and try to get them involved in your campaign, possibly serve as volunteers. So the earlier you can do that, the better. You can do that by reaching out to like-minded organizations. In town, if your district includes other counties that you're not really familiar, it's important to try to find people in the other counties to be part of that base, because again, you're not going to have the contacts in the other counties. You're not going to have the ability to recruit volunteers. So bringing those people into your base will be important. Build the relationships early on. This is something that Briana mentioned. And it is important to reach out to those who often feel left out, and so who are really ignored, aren't really part of the, maybe not even part of your targeting, but it is good to include those people. It's important to get people really on your really advisory board in your campaign that have lots of different experiences, and like diversity in terms of where they come from, even like they don't all have to be local. But what you're aiming to do here is trying to build this long-term support, and you want this base to stay with you even after you win, or even if you don't win. They stay with you for your next election, or they may turn into people who will be candidates. And the best thing you can do is you turn in your supporters into your volunteers, and then your volunteers into your leaders who will kind of be running themselves the next go around. But on more of the quantitative stuff, you're making sure that the field director analyzes the voter and precinct profiles and identifies who you're going to target, develops the plan, and manages the get out the vote plan, which I mentioned that's kind of what the field director does. But as a campaign manager, you need to know at any given time kind of what the field director knows. So, what are they thinking? How are they going to target? What are they going to focus on? Mailers, door knocking, phone banking. So people will ask the campaign manager all sorts of questions, and if you say, it's okay to say, I don't know everything, because you're not the expert. Oh, you have to talk to my field director, but you have to have, a general idea of what the plan is to get people. They need to believe in you so that they can believe in the campaign as well. All right. And I know we have a workshop on communications, right? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I'm talking about this section, and it is like my most serious growing edge. Like, I am not good at any of these things. I'm like anyway, so like we needed people helping out with this stuff because Tim did a lot of it. I am just not good at it. So anyway, social media, press, website, regular newsletters, and I'm mentioning these as ways to engage constituents. And so the biggest thing for me, as far as communication goes, is how does your communication strategy align with your values? So for example, one of the platform pieces for Tim's campaign was an open door democracy. So this meant an engaged, accessible, transparent government, and there was also a political education component of that. Like, we have an ethical obligation to make local government more accessible to people and to make sure that they understand how it works, because we don't learn that in school. I didn't learn about local government until I moved here in 2014. I mean, so that was something that we really tried to embody in our communications strategy. So can we play the video?
You know what? I just realized it's in PowerPoint.
Oh, it's okay. It should still
play.
Yeah,
still play.
Yeah, because it's embedded.
So just click on that.
Yep.
Oh. It's because I don't have it. It's not on the internet.
Oh, so because we're not connected to the internet?
To the internet.
Okay. All right, that's okay. Anyway, this was no, that's fine. This was a video where Tim was talking about the platform plank of an open door democracy and how this like direct community engagement wasn't going to stop when the campaign ended. So he's talking about his priorities to do a newsletter, a monthly newsletter, which is something he's doing now. Keep people up to date and informed through social media, and also host people's assemblies, which are like the idea is for them to be like regular meetings where people in the district are invited to come and like talk about some of their concerns or things that are going on. And in this video, he also breaks down how local government works, how the mayor and commission work, how many there are, with the districts. And so it was a combination of like, these are my policy priorities and this is what I commit to doing now and after this campaign is over. And the political education component of this is how local government works. So this is just one example of how we use communications to enhance, in a way that aligned with our campaign values. This was one of Mary Sue's campaign videos, but yeah, we can't play it, so anyway.
Yes.
Do you want to say anything about it?
Sure. Like the videos should be really short, so I think both of the videos were under a minute because people.
Tim's was longer.
Was it?
Educational, yeah.
Okay, but I know Tim also had short videos that were about a minute. And I think this one was Mary Sue talking about some like $15 minimum wage and Medicaid expansion and some key issues. But we could connect, but it's going to be a mess to connect to the internet right now. Okay, endorsements. So I'm going to talk a little bit about endorsements because as a campaign manager, that is also, I guess I should say there are three things. Develop the campaign plan, develop the budget, seek endorsements are kind of, I mean, beyond everything else that you're overseeing, those are kind of three key things. So, thank you. Why are endorsements important? They are important because they'll help your candidate establish name recognition and their credibility. And credibility is important because, well, one, you want people to vote for you, but you're also more likely to receive contributions, bless you, if you seem like a viable, credible candidate. It will also serve as a source of volunteers. So if an organization endorses the candidate, then members of that organization may be more willing to also volunteer as well as give money. So it could be endorsements from a lot of various sources. It could be kind of just a personal, like an individual giving the endorsement. So, like high-profile legislators, like if you get an endorsement, from John Lewis, that may be like a really cool thing. So it could be either local, state, community leaders. It could be organizations, like local organizations like Athens for Everyone, or national ones like Emily's List that I mentioned, or you could also get endorsements from newspapers. I'm not sure how important those were in 2018, the newspaper endorsements, but...
May I just add?
Yeah.
So endorsements, you see these every election and virtually every level of election. But there's some very important caveats here. So endorsements matter for primaries. So you've got your hardcore voters. So let's say in a Democratic primary, they're trying to discern which individual is the most viable choice or which individual most closely aligns with their beliefs, because they're both Democrats. And so endorsements can matter. If you're running for a nonpartisan race like sheriff or commissioner, what we know about voters is voters will still, even if they don't fully agree with you on your issues or policy stance, they vote by party line. So endorsements can help imply which party you're with. Now, of course, you can come out and say, like, I'm a Democrat, but endorsements really help solidify in the voter's mind which party you're with. And so endorsements really matter for primaries and for nonpartisan races. And then the third thing, like you said, is donors. So you're more likely to bring in donations and increase your fundraising the more endorsements that you have. But it depends on what level of race you're running.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Thank you, Avery. Okay, and so I'm gonna just go skip down to the last bullet and then go up. The endorsement process is really time consuming, and it's also up to you and the candidate whether you'll be, filling out, the like first draft of the application process, or whether the candidate will do it and you can help, review that. But it's really time consuming, so you may not choose to get every endorsement, right? It may not be worthwhile to get every endorsement that, every organization that will reach out to you. You may say, it's just not worth it. I don't know if it's gonna help anything, so I'm not gonna spend, the 10 hours to do this. So why is it time consuming? Well, it depends, again, which organization it is. But the packet typically consists of a questionnaire or a survey, a copy of your campaign plan, maybe a more detailed strategy than the brief overview of the campaign plan, a detailed budget, and may also include a phone interview and then an in-person interview. So this is, I think Georgia's win list required all of these. So this is very time-consuming and lots of, like a questionnaire with lots of questions that probably took like 30 hours to get through, maybe. I honestly can't remember which endorsement I'm thinking of right now. And sometimes the campaign will reach out to a potential organization to try to seek their endorsement. Oh boy. And other times the organization will reach out to you. But again, you may decide not to seek out, and that's okay. And that's like a decision that you have to make with the candidate. And maybe, that's, yeah. Do you want to say anything else, or does anyone else want to say anything about endorsements? And Avery made a real good point that they're really important in primaries and for the nonpartisan elections.
If you're running for like a general election state level race, you could win that race without a single endorsement.
Yeah.
Just things to keep in mind.
Were there any endorsements that you decided, just too time consuming, the candidate has too many other things going on, we're just not going to go after them?
We didn't go after any endorsements.
Okay.
Only those that actually wanted us to apply, we did, but we didn't seek out any.
Okay, yeah. These are just some graphics. Once your candidate does get an endorsement, it's kind of a cool thing to put that graphic to show, because again, voters aren't really paying a lot of attention, so just something like that. So the United Campus First Georgia, the Monster in Action, and Georgia's win list. Yeah, and I know Tim also had some cool graphics for our revolution, I think. And
our revolution, and then why can't I think of the labor union?
Is it? It was a national one.
Yeah.
Labor union.
Okay.
Yeah.
The AFL-CIO.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Georgia AFL-CIO.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ooh, I'm going to talk about that too. All right. Fundraising. I already mentioned that the candidate typically doesn't like doing this, but it is really important that they do it. So that's really you need to make sure as a campaign manager that you're, like a hard ass on them and just do it. I already mentioned that they need to have time blocked off on the calendar, and I'm not going to go into this in any detail because I know that Keisha Carter-Brown had her workshop. She talked about fundraising, but in your campaign plan, you need to talk about how you're going to raise those funds and what are the different methods and how much, or like what percentage of your total is going to be raised using these different methods. So with call time, house parties, fundraisers, direct mail, if you're going to do that, online, so that's like from your website, if you're going to get any PAC money, or any endorsing organizations, like Georgia's win list, they gave, I think, $2,000 to everyone that they endorsed, so that's kind of some ways to raise funds. And then you'll work as the campaign manager with the fundraiser director to draw up the circles of benefit for the candidate, which we won't talk about because that's what was last week's. I imagine that's what you talked about last week. But this is the candidate coming up with their personal circle, people to call, and people in their ideological circle, so other people in like-minded organizations that care about certain issues. Your axe to grind circle, so people who are upset with a opponent, and your power circle. Yep, so that's what you're doing with fundraising. You definitely want someone, I said like you can combine certain roles. The fundraising director should probably be, I think, a separate position. Since fundraising is so important, I don't think someone should be doing that as well. So that's kind of just my humble opinion. Okay. And then your budget, you have to, again, create that at the beginning of the campaign. So very early on, it might change, but you should have an idea of where you want to spend your budget. And your budget really reflects the priorities of the campaign. So if you really want to, reach out or like turn out more Democratic voters, then you have to put money in your budget for that. So if you look at a budget, you'll be able to tell kind of what a campaign strategy is by seeing where they're spending their money. But these are like some general expenses. So voter outreach is probably going to be, a large chunk of your budget. Mailers, I put that they're probably like at least 50% because they're expensive. But if you've worked on a campaign that's been different, let me know. But that's mailers, your push cards, your postcards, yard signs, which are, all of the volunteers want yard signs. Campaigns hate paying money for yard signs because they say, the yard signs don't vote, but it is something you have to do. You have to decide if you're going to put any money in your budget for any paid canvassing. Yes?
So I'm just curious, would you assess that yard signs have little to no effect on like getting more people to vote or support your candidate, and it's mainly just a thing you do like to make your supporters feel good? I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that. I just want to know.
I think the research indicates that that is the case, that there is no significant effect on voting by yard signs. So you're doing that for your volunteers and.
You think that's true in local elections, nonpartisan elections?
I would say yes, but I don't know. What do you? Yeah.
The research. So Green and Gerber are two political scientists at Yale, and they've been doing this since '89, studying campaign efficacy and yard signs. They're basically the equivalent of having bumper stickers, like the 13.1 or whatever. And it's just it's your symbolizing yourself and your identity.
Dan?
I do think it gives you a certain viability in the community. If your opponents have yard signs out there and you don't, they'll be like, oh, that candidate's not viable, and I'm not going to pay attention.
So you have to do it.
And it's an easy way to, you can print them very small numbers these days, where you used to be able to do that. And I think they're a pat on the back of your supporters. They probably don't bring in any, like there's a return on investment, a return on voters. Signs would be very low on the
on the ROI. Now I know with larger campaigns they charge for yard signs, but I don't know how I feel about that. And I know with like Stacey Abrams campaign, like people couldn't get them, and there just weren't enough, or they couldn't. I can't remember what happened, but I think we made our own. Like, didn't Athens?
Yeah, I think a small group of people.
Made like their own.
Giving them out to volunteers. If you volunteer.
You have to volunteer, right, and you could decide to do that. I mean, everyone who's donated should at least be able to get one and maybe volunteer. But okay, so that's voter outreach. You're gonna another major expense, no matter the campaign, will be media and communication. You may or may not decide to do radio ads, the digital print advertising, like Facebook ads are really cheap and kind kind of a good way to target. They have good targeting mechanisms to get your message out to whoever you want to. Photography, videography, if you can get volunteers to do that, that's even better. Like I think we got Kyle Brothers to do a video for free. Then things like buttons, volunteers like these things. So if you talk to other campaigns, what we did was talk to other campaigns and try to get, the best prices. So did that with yard signs. We were able to get yard signs for, I think, $3 each, and they were like with the union bug. So kind of talk to other campaigns. That's why it's good to maintain your relationships with other campaigns to get that. Office expenses, right? You may, if you decide to rent, have a campaign headquarters, and that's kind of the question. Like, do you think a campaign headquarters is necessary? I think it depends on the size of your campaign and how your fundraising is going. Because if you're spending all this money on rent, then rather than using it for voter outreach, then you're not doing, good job. Salaries, this is if you're going to pay someone, typically campaign manager is paid. You may also pay some consultants, like someone to help with the direct mail. You may have someone helping with speeches, like a speechwriter, or I don't know what other consultants, campaign, like a one-time fee. And then any event fees. And again, depending on the size of your campaign, you may decide to pay for a poll. I've never worked on a campaign that did polling, like official polling. And I know that it'd probably be between $1,000 to $3,000 to like do a decent poll.
The smaller the district, the more expensive it is because it's harder to get those. And so to give anybody here an example, if you're trying to go for like a state house level, to get about 300 leads, which is what they need, it's going to cost you about $5,000.
About $5,000. Yeah. Okay, so it's a lot. Do you do any polling?
I have a colleague up at UGA who specifically does polling and works with things like Qualtrics.
Got it. Okay. But it may not, I don't know a lot of campaigns, like local ones that do that. If you have extra money, you can do that. And those are the areas that I thought of. Are there any other items in the budget that you... So you'll create this budget and you'll then say, we expect to, raise this much money to help pay for it. Endorsements will want to know what your budget goals are. And again, it's kind of a tough process because if you want to be bold, but you also want to be realistic. You want to get the endorsement from the organization, but if you say, oh, our budget is like $5,000 for a state senate race, they'll think, well, there's no way you can win with that. So you need to kind of go bigger and then adjust or go down if things aren't working out. Okay, that's budget. Budget and fundraising. Any questions? And it is your job as a campaign manager to remind the team about the budget, because the team will bring up, ideas like, oh, we want to get 500 t-shirts for folks. And I have to say, well, it's not, we can't look at the budget, we can't really get 500 t-shirts. Right? So it is important for people to kind of know where you're spending your money.
What's a realistic amount for some of these smaller local elections?
Do you want to do examples?
I don't know. I didn't come prepared to answer that, so I don't remember what our budget was. Yeah, sorry. If you send me an email, I can check and let you know.
I think for county commission. Oh, who's talking?
Me.
Carol. Oh, you, Francis. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, I've forgotten, but somewhere in the back of my brain is like, I think for Davenport we raised $7,000.
I think the lady last time said Kelly Burns had $25,000 in his budget.
Yeah, so if we want to use local numbers, so commission races can be about 10,000.
10 to 30.
Mayoral races like Athens-Clarke was about 25,000, and that's historically about accurate as well. Nancy Denson raised more than that. But for house races, the average is around 112,000. So that just gives you an idea of how it scales up.
Yeah, yeah. I think Tommy raised commissioner was like 25, but that was considered.
Well, I mean, if you
lot.
there's 159 counties, right, and there's like 180 districts, and the average house district is like 112,000.
Yeah. So I think for Mary Sue, our budget was probably between 80 to 110,000.
For some of the nonpartisan and municipal
Yeah.
races in my realm, it's strategic to keep your budget under $2,500 for reporting purposes.
Ah, okay. Because if it's under 2,500,
You don't have to make detailed reports on everything. Like you basically just say, I didn't raise $2,500, and then you next year
Oh, that's right.
you say we raised less than $2,500.
Okay. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. Basically, everything that we've already talked about, you're going to want to plug into a calendar or timeline of some sort as early as possible. So this includes field schedules for canvassing, phone banking, when you want to send out mailers, what your get out the vote calendar is going to look like. This also includes community events that you know are coming up that you want to be at, events that the campaign is hosting, fundraising, so fundraising events and the call schedule that Lydia was talking about. Any like relevant dates around communications, reporting requirements, and a social media plan. So if you want to get creative and map out way ahead of time, like this week we're going to make some posts about this thing or whatever, like that could be really helpful. Can you think of anything else that isn't on here? Okay.
Francis?
I just also, reporting requirements is already on there. Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is creativity. So for Tim's campaign, we were really lucky to have volunteers who were willing to create art for us and graphics for us. And this really added like an extra layer of just like excitement and joy to the process of campaigning, especially in a town like Athens where there is a really amazing art and music scene. How can we sort of plug into that and get people excited about the campaign by making it fun? So not only is the graphic in the upper right-hand corner really cool, but we also did a politics and hip-hop show and had amazing local artists perform. The piece on the left is by a local artist named Eleanor Davis, and she graciously created this for us and donated it to us and really raised money from selling some of these posters. And then in the center was a logo that Tim's wife Jenny Jensen made, and that was like our holiday logo. So that went on our holiday events, invitations, and thank you cards and things like that. So and also we went caroling around the holidays, which was really fun and kind of silly. Not that many people signed up to go with us, but we 4 separate times we went knocking on doors and caroling, and then we gave people candy and a small piece of literature, and we weren't trying to talk about the campaign in that moment, but it was just people don't really get caroled anymore, so it was fun. So think about creative ways to do this work. And then last quote from Adrienne Marie Brown, I promise. She says that I suspect that to really transform our society, we will need to make justice one of the most pleasurable experiences we can have. So be thinking about how that can sort of bleed into every aspect of your campaign. Oh yeah, I put these. Not really. I put 2 other slides on here where we were going to share little anecdotes about how to respond to unexpected things that come up, and general comments. But how about we just open it? We have 7 more minutes together. Open it up for questions, ideas, conversation.
Make sure you get Facebook and Instagram aligned so you can go back and forth between the various areas. some people are, and Twitter.
And Twitter. But not Snapchat. Any questions? That's all we have. Thank you.
Great, thank you guys so
Did you
much.
have anything else to add?
No,
It's a campaign.
nope.
Yeah. It is a very emotional and stressful time, and so it's always good to have, someone to talk to. And also the candidate will often come to you and be stressed out, and you need to sort of serve as their like senator and their advisor and their counselor. So
Yeah.
So it's fun.
Who wants to be a campaign manager? Raise your hand. Who wants to be a campaign manager?
No?